Okay, think about the last time you tried to uh, convince someone of something.
Hmm.
Maybe it was just, picking a movie for movie night, or maybe something bigger.
Yeah, it could be
The
anything.
truth is, like Chris Voss said, life is a series of negotiations. We're doing it constantly.
We really are. Trying to influence things, big and small.
So if you're doing it anyway every single day, wouldn't you want to have like a real edge?
Absolutely. And that's exactly what we're getting into today.
Our mission for this deep dive.
It's to give you some really practical, usable techniques, things you can use right away to get better at negotiating in like all parts of your life.
Forget that old idea that it's all just logic and, meeting halfway.
Yeah, that compromise-driven stuff. We're going way beyond that.
Exactly. We've been digging into mastering the art of negotiation and influence. And the core idea is really powerful.
What is it?
Influencing behavior. It really boils down to connecting with the other person emotionally, truly understanding where they're coming from.
Right. And we're not talking about being manipulative here.
No, not at all. We're going to unpack some, surprising tactics, but really effective ones for getting better outcomes just by understanding what actually drives people.
So the book kind of kicks things off by challenging those old rules.
The ones about rational arguments and logical compromise.
Exactly that. For years, the standard advice was lay out your case logically. The other person sees reason. You meet somewhere in the middle. Simple.
Okay, yeah, let's break that down. It's almost like we're taught if you just explain the facts clearly, everyone will just sort of nod along with the most logical path.
But the book argues we miss something huge there.
Which is?
That we're not purely rational, not even close, our emotions. They're massive drivers, often much more than pure logic.
Right, that makes sense. Emotions cloud things or maybe
Yeah,
guide things?
precisely. And that's where this idea of tactical empathy fits in.
Tactical empathy. Okay, what does that mean exactly? Is it like feeling sorry for them?
Not quite. It's not about being a therapist or absorbing their pain. It's more strategic. It's about understanding their feelings, their perspective, well enough to actually influence the negotiation.
Ah, okay. So you recognize their emotional state.
Kind of use that understanding strategically. The real insight is just by acknowledging someone's emotions, even if you totally disagree with why they feel that way, you create breathing room for a more rational chat later on.
So it's not about caving in or just saying, yeah, I agree.
No.
It's about really trying to see it their way, understanding what's really going on for them underneath the surface arguments.
Spot on. And this is where it gets interesting. How do we actually do that? How do we tap into that understanding?
Yeah.
Well, one of the quickest, most effective ways to build that initial connection, it's called mirroring.
Mirroring, like copying them. Your inner mirror, huh? I like that. How does that work in like a real conversation? Sounds maybe a little weird.
It's actually super subtle,
Bah.
but yeah, incredibly powerful. Mirroring is basically just repeating the last, say, 1 to 3 words.
The last few words.
Yeah, or the critical phrase of what the other person just said. The psychology behind it is, well, we tend to like and trust people who subtly mimic us. It's unconscious.
Huh.
It triggers this feeling of familiarity, connection, makes them feel heard, understood on a deeper level.
So if someone says, I'm really concerned about the potential risks involved, I'd just repeat back potential risks involved.
Exactly. And you'd probably use a calm tone, inquisitive. The book calls it the late night FM DJ voice.
Huh. Okay, the calm, curious voice.
Yeah, it encourages them to elaborate, think out loud more. And here's a really key part that makes mirroring even stronger. Silence.
Silence. Oh man, that can feel awkward, especially in a tense moment.
It can, but that's precisely why it works. So that little bit of quiet prompts the other person to keep talking, to explain more, and often they reveal crucial stuff, underlying things they wouldn't have shared otherwise.
Wow.
The book tells this story, a hostage negotiation, where the negotiator just mirrored a key phrase the kidnapper said.
And then just stayed quiet. And the kidnapper ended up revealing this deep fear he had about losing face with his own guys, just from that silence.
Just from echoing a few words and then nothing. It's amazing. Such a simple thing, but so revealing. Okay, so mirroring helps build that first connection. How do we dig deeper into those emotions you mentioned?
Right, so that's where labeling comes in.
Labeling.
Labeling is basically verbalizing the emotions you think the other person is feeling. You're putting a name to what you're seeing or hearing.
Okay, give me some examples. What's that sound like in practice?
You might say something like, it sounds like you're feeling really frustrated right now, or it seems like you're worried about making that deadline,
Uh-huh.
or even it looks like maybe you're a bit disappointed by this offer. They're just neutral observations, right? Not judgments, not accusations.
Got it.
The key insight is just by naming an emotion, you help kind of diffuse it, take the edge off its intensity, even if you don't agree with the reason behind it. So we're basically just saying out loud the emotion we're picking up on. But the book really stresses, and this seems important, we're not saying their position is right.
Exactly.
We're just acknowledging the feeling itself.
Yeah.
That's a big difference, isn't it?
Huge difference. You're validating their emotional experience. That builds trust. And it can seriously de-escalate negative feelings. And interestingly, it works for positive emotions too. Labeling those reinforces them, encourages more cooperation.
And the book says use phrases like, it seems like, or it looks like, not I feel. Why is that little wording change so critical?
It keeps the focus on them, on their experience. If you say, I feel you're frustrated, it can sound a bit like you're making assumptions, maybe even judging.
Right.
But it seems like you're frustrated. That's just an observation based on what they're showing you. Keeps it external. There's that example in the book, the angry supplier.
Yeah, I remember that one.
He felt totally undervalued.
Yeah.
And just by the client labeling that feeling, it seems like you feel undervalued. It calmed things right down. They could start talking about the real issue, which wasn't just the price.
Okay, this is great stuff. Mirroring for connection, labeling for understanding, and diffusing emotion. Now, this next idea really threw me. Mastering the power of no. I mean, don't we always want to get to yes?
That's the common wisdom, isn't it? That ingrained drive to get agreement.
Yeah.
But the book argues pretty convincingly that no can actually be way more powerful in a negotiation.
That feels totally backwards. We're always shooting for yes.
Think about it. No gives the other person a sense of control, autonomy. If someone feels pushed or backed into a corner to say yes, what happens?
They get defensive, maybe resentful.
Exactly. And they're less likely to actually follow through later. But letting them say no, or even making it easy for them to say no, can actually open things up, create a safer space for honest talk.
Yeah, that's a really interesting way to frame it. So how do we encourage a no? Still feels a bit risky.
Well, you can frame your question strategically, make it comfortable, even inviting for them to say no, like asking, is now a bad time to talk?
Ah, okay. Gives them an easy out right away, less pressure.
Right. And the book points out a no often isn't the end of the road. It's not usually a flat rejection of everything.
So what does it mean then, usually?
Often, no just means I need more info before I can say yes, or I'm not ready yet, or something about this makes me uncomfortable. It's actually an opportunity.
An opportunity to find out what the real issue is.
Exactly, to understand the hesitation. And the crucial next step after a no is asking open-ended questions, like what's the biggest challenge you see with this?
Yeah.
Remember that sales example? The client said no because of the cost initially.
Yeah.
But when asked a question like that, they revealed their real concern was about long-term value. So the no actually led to finding the real hurdle and then finding a solution that worked for everyone.
Wow, this is really changing how I think about negotiation. So don't fear the no. See it as a signal, a chance to learn more. Okay. So what's the flip side? What's the ultimate agreement signal we should be aiming for?
Surprisingly, it's not just a simple yes.
Oh.
It's the phrase, that's right.
That's right. Okay, how is that so different from just, yes or you're right?
Well, you're right can sometimes feel a bit dismissive, can it? Like someone's just agreeing to shut you up or to be polite, but they don't really get it.
Yeah, I can see that.
That's right, though. That's a powerful sign. It means the other person feels genuinely deeply understood. It means you've nailed their perspective, the facts and the feelings underneath. They're saying, yes, you get me. It's a real connection moment.
Okay, so how do we get them to say, that's right? That sounds like the holy grail of negotiation validation.
It comes directly from everything we've been talking about. Active listening, using mirroring and labeling well, and then summarizing their position back to them, concisely, accurately, in a way that really reflects their experience.
And the key is?
No hint of argument, no correcting them in your summary. Your only goal is showing you completely grasp their viewpoint, even if you don't agree with it. The book had that labor dispute example.
With the job security concerns.
Yeah. The negotiator summarized the union's worries, hit all the right notes, and finally got that big, that's right.
Yeah.
That feeling of being understood broke the tension, and opened the door for actual progress.
Okay, I'm really seeing how these pieces fit together now.
Yeah.
Mirroring, labeling, summarizing, aiming for, that's right.
Yeah.
Now, the book also talks about bending the reality. That sounds a bit
A bit dodgy. Yeah, the phrasing is provocative.
Huh.
But it's less about like tricking someone and more about strategically shaping how they perceive the negotiation landscape.
Okay.
One big technique here is anchoring.
Anchoring. Like dropping an initial offer that kind of sets the tone for everything else.
Exactly. You start with an offer that's maybe extreme, but still, defensible.
Yeah.
That first number heavily influences what the other person then sees as reasonable or possible. It sets that anchor point. And the book also really leans into loss aversion, that psychological thing where people hate losing something much more than they like gaining something of equal value.
Yeah, I've heard of that. We're more motivated by fear of loss.
Much more. So instead of just talking about the potential benefits of your proposal, you also strategically highlight what they might lose if they don't agree.
Like that salary negotiation example. Not just give me a raise, but if you don't provide a competitive package, you risk losing valuable talent, framing it around preventing a loss.
Precisely. It can be much more persuasive. And ultimately, the goal is to frame what you're proposing not just as something you want, but as a solution to their problems, their challenges.
Makes total sense. Shifting the focus off you and onto solving their issues.
Yeah.
Now, how do we keep them feeling like they're in control, even while we're using these strategic approaches?
By skillfully creating the illusion of control. It sounds sneaky, but it's not really. When the other person feels like they're steering the ship, they're just more comfortable, more receptive, more likely to agree to something they helped create.
Okay, and the main tool for that is?
Calibrated questions.
Calibrated questions.
Yeah.
What makes them different from just any open-ended question?
They're specifically open-ended questions that start with how or what. These are really powerful because they forced the other person to think, to problem solve, to come up with solutions themselves.
So they feel ownership over the ideas.
Exactly. They feel like they're figuring it out, like they're in control of finding the answer.
Can you give me a couple of examples, how they sound?
Sure. Instead of asking, maybe accusingly, why can't you agree to this price, you'd ask, what would need to happen for you to feel comfortable with this price?
Okay. Much less confrontational.
Or, how can we work together to make this work for both of us? The book really warns against using why questions. They tend to put people on the defensive immediately.
Right. Why feels like an accusation.
Remember the hostage example. Instead of demanding hostages be released, the negotiator asked, how can we resolve this so everyone goes home safely? It shifts it to collaborative problem solving.
It's subtle, guiding them towards a solution that works, but making them feel like they're leading the way. Very clever. Okay, so let's say we use all this, we reach an agreement, verbally. How do we make sure it actually happens, that it gets implemented? A handshake isn't always enough.
That's a super critical point. An agreement is only good if it gets executed, right?
Right.
So to make sure things actually happen, avoid confusion later, you need to focus specifically on the how. How is this going to get done?
And how do we get that clarity and commitment?
By asking another carefully calibrated question. How will you implement this?
Simple, but effective.
Yeah. It prompts them to think through the actual steps, to spot potential problems or challenges, and it lets you see how committed they really are. You also want to watch their nonverbal cues here. Do they look hesitant? Unsure?
Good point.
And finally, always summarize the agreed actions. Always. And critically, get that confirming that's right again. Make sure everyone's absolutely on the same page about who does what, when, how, just like that consultant and client example in the book.
Makes perfect sense. Clear steps, shared understanding, confirmed commitment. Okay. But what about when things get tough? When you're not dealing with someone cooperative, what about actual hard bargaining?
Yeah, those tougher situations, they need a different, maybe more assertive toolkit. The book introduces something called the Ackerman model for that.
The Ackerman model.
Yeah.
Sounds very structured. How does it work?
It is structured. It's a systematic way to make offers during hard bargaining. You start low, like maybe 65% of your target price.
65%. That seems really low. Risk of offending them.
It can be, yeah. That's why you absolutely have to back it up with clear reasons, data if you have it. Then you make a series of planned increases, maybe up to 85% of your target, then 95%, and finally your actual target price, 100%.
So specific increments.
Yes. And another key part, use precise, non-round numbers. Offer, say, $1,237 instead of just $1,200.
Why the odd numbers?
It makes the offer seem more calculated, like you've really thought it through, not just plucked a round number out of the air. And one last touch. At your final offer, throw in a non-monetary concession.
Something easy for you to give, but valuable to them.
Exactly. Like offering faster delivery when you're negotiating on a car price. It makes them feel like they got one last win, makes the final number more palatable.
So it's a careful dance.
Yeah.
Anchor low, increase strategically with reasons, use precise numbers, sweeten the final deal. Sounds like a solid plan for pushing back without just being aggressive. Okay, last big concept, finding the black swan. Intriguing name. Sounds like finding hidden treasure.
Kind of. A black swan here means that piece of information you didn't know existed, didn't expect, but which completely changes the negotiation. It's some hidden leverage, some critical insight.
Wow. So how do we hunt for these black swans? They sound rare.
They often are. It takes real deep listening, asking smart, probing, open-ended questions, and really paying attention to inconsistencies, things that don't quite add up in what they're saying or even how they're acting.
Like being a detective.
Yeah, pretty much. You need real curiosity.
Yeah.
You need to be willing to question your own assumptions about what they need or want. Black swans often reveal the real underlying needs or fears or constraints that aren't being said out loud.
Like that business deal example, where asking more questions revealed the other side was facing a big regulatory penalty.
Exactly. That explained why they were suddenly so urgent to close the deal. Finding that black swan gave massive leverage.
It's like peeling back layers to find the hidden truth. This whole discussion has been, wow, really insightful, changed some core ideas I had about negotiating. So if we had to boil it all down, what's the biggest shift here?
I think the most fundamental shift is getting away from negotiation as just a battle of logic, aiming for compromise,
Right.
and instead recognizing how huge human emotion is in all this, and then learning to navigate those emotions using tactical empathy.
And we've hit on some really powerful practical tools, things like mirroring to build rapport fast, labeling emotions to diffuse negativity and really understand, embracing no, not as failure, but as a chance for clarity, striving for that all-important, that's right,
Spot on.
and using those calibrated how and what questions to guide things while letting them feel in control.
Exactly. And these aren't just, abstract ideas. They're real tools, tested tools you can literally start using in your next conversation, big or small.
So here's something for you, the listener, to really think about. Now that you get the power behind these techniques, how might you go into your next negotiation, doesn't matter if it's big or small, how might you approach it differently, really focusing on uncovering those hidden needs to get better outcomes for everyone involved?
Yeah, and maybe think bigger, too. How can understanding human emotion, not just in negotiation, but everywhere, in relationships, at work, how can that become like your superpower? There's always more to learn, always deeper to go. But that ability to connect, to understand people emotionally, that's potentially transformative.